Hello and welcome to this tutorial on how to sew the Xipe Totec wrap dress pattern by Telabeja. You can find the link to the pattern in the description. After printing the pattern, I'm cutting one long and one short side of the paper at the markings to prepare them for gluing. Then I glue everything together. You can also use tape, but this way you can iron the pattern if it gets wrinkly when storing it. I'm marking my size with a highlighter to make it easier for me to cut at the right lines. And then I only need to cut the pattern out. I'm doing the same for the top pattern, as I've just cut the skirt pattern and I want to make the dress. I place the pattern onto my 150 cm wide fabric. For the ruffles, I'm marking them with chalk first to make cutting easier, especially since the spiral can be a bit tricky to cut out. The sleeve and back pieces should go on the fold, but if your skirt and back piece doesn't fit on the fold, it's also fine to cut it twice, but remember to add seam allowance. After cutting, the first step is to sew together the ruffle pieces on the short sides. Then you're going to finish the outer raw edges of the ruffles and sleeves. Here I'm sewing together the ruffles and then I'm finishing the seam with my overlock. You can also do this with a zigzag stitch on your regular sewing machine. I'm doing the same for the sleeves. Afterwards, I'm folding over the seam allowance and I'm top stitching it to the inside of the wrong side of the sleeve. Alternatively, you can also sew a rolled hem. The next step is to gather the front shoulder seam to match the shoulder seam of the back bodice piece. Choose the longest straight stitch on your machine for gathering fabric. Then just sew along the edge while only backstitching on one or no side. The fabric will gather automatically. Now you can gently pull the thread to adjust the gathering. Do the same for the other side. Now you can pin the shoulder and side seams together. I'm carefully sewing the gathered shoulder seam to the back shoulder seam so that the gathers are spread out evenly. I'm sewing the side seams of the bodice here. And this is what the bodice looks like so far. I'm now going to attach the sleeves by matching the bottom notch to the side seam of the bodice and pinning all around the circular arm side. Again, I'm sewing with my overlock, but if you're using a regular sewing machine, always remember to finish the edge afterwards with a zigzag stitch. The bodice looks almost ready, but we still have to finish the collar. I'm not sewing the collar ruffle for this dress, but I'll show you how to do that later. To finish the collar without ruffles, I simply finished the edge with my overlock and I'm now top stitching the seam allowance, which I folded to the inside of the bodice. You can use Wonder tape to prevent the fabric from stretching while you're sewing. If you're sewing the collar ruffle, pin and sew the collar with the wrong side facing the right side of the bodice. Then fold the seam allowance of 1 cm towards the inside of the bodice and top stitch it all around the collar. I'm top stitching the seam allowance after attaching the ruffles to the collar. Now let's go on with the skirt. Sew together the side seams. If your back skirt piece didn't fit on the fold, you need to sew the back skirt pieces together first at the back seam. Next, you're going to attach the skirt ruffles if you want them. Align the back seam with the fold of the back skirt and the side seam of the skirt with the notches on the ruffles. Please be aware that the ruffles can stretch out due to the bias cut. Again, if you're not sewing with an overlock, you should finish the edges afterwards with a zigzag stitch in your sewing machine. Gently ease the skirt into the ruffles while sewing. Afterwards, iron and top stitch the seam allowance towards the ruffles with a straight stitch. Now you can sew the bodice to the skirt. Align the back notches, side seams and fronts. Now, all you need to do is choose your closing mechanism. I'm going for straps, which I want to tie into a bow at the side, and I'll show you other possibilities later on. I cut my straps out of leftover fabric and I'm just sewing the ends together to form one long band. Afterwards, you should iron both ends towards the inside and fold the band in half, encasing the raw edges inside. I was too impatient for ironing, so I'm directly folding it while sewing. You can also make the straps with a loop turner, but I don't have one, so I'm using this method. Done! Now I have two long straps. Attach a strap to each end of the wrap. Then you can either sew a buttonhole to the side of your bodice, or as I am doing right now, you can secure the side seam by ripping a hole in between for the strap to go through. Here you can see that I secured both sides and I'm cutting open the side seam in between. Just big enough for the strap to fit through. And this is how it works. One string is inserted into the side seam hole, it goes all around and you can close it on the side. You can also sew a button with a button loop to one side, add a fastener to the collar for more security, and a hook and eye for closing on the inside. And the dress is done! Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next tutorial.